What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Masculine Health Solutions podcast, where we are blessed to be joined by Kyle Rootsaert, who's going to give us the lowdown on not prescribing medicines for everything, maybe looking for a root cause every now and again, maybe not aligning himself with big pharma to fuck you up even worse than you might already be. This comes from personal experience in the fact that Kyle had to deal with diabetes in his own life. But instead of just taking it on and saying, hey, I'm just going to take some more drugs for it and not really fix it, he decided to actually grab life by the balls and go after it in an unscripted way. Hence the reason why Unscripted Pharma exists. And I'm blessed to be here with Kyle today and have this conversation because there's a lot of guys that are going through it. And Lord, it is a blessing to have Kyle on. But first and foremost, Kyle, man, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Anybody that's into the root cause of things and actually curing things and looking for solutions, because that's kind of what I made this podcast for, man. It's I'm trying to find different solutions when it comes to health. I am tired of hearing of here, take this pill, here, take this Band-Aid. It might work, it might not, it might fuck up your endocrine system. It probably will. And then we'll give you some other drugs to fix that. So it's kind of I'm just done with it. And I'm always happy to talk to people like yourself, man. So today's a blessing, like I said.
This is so cool. I mean, I gotta pinch myself because I didn't think I'd ever get to this point where we're having this discussion.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Oh, I get it. We don't want to talk to you, right? We don't want to hear what you found. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's. I am so grateful. I remember the first keto burrito at El Pollo Loco. I took a picture next to it. I'm like, keto, it's a word now. It's a diet word. Don't kill it. Don't destroy it. Because that's what I was doing 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I was trying to get patients to fast. Mm-hmm. But I myself, I knew nothing. I went down this road and going, I don't know how to help diabetic patients. They're asking me what to eat. And as a pharmacist, it's a vial. It comes in, it's on the shelf, right? That's food. I never thought about what am I putting in my mouth? I really didn't know carbs from fat from protein. I had to just go, all right, it's better actually in so many ways to not know and to start off fresh than having to deal with something that you already know that's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? When you are fed the raw, it's so trying to answer that question, I never felt okay with, well, I don't know. It has to be, I don't know. And I've got to get back to you on that one because that's incomplete in my little head that I've got to work on. So I had to go in the strangest places. And eventually I discovered Jason Fung, right? I don't know if you guys are aware of Jason Fung. So his 8-hour lecture, basically, I think it was like Obesity Code. And it was on YouTube. And I watched
that book. I got that book actually.
Yes. It's a great book. Jason, what a wonderful Canadian, huh? Anyways, but so I just, whatever I could consume from him and understanding the role of insulin, right? Insulin, right? That was the most important thing that you would have learned from diabetes code is that in type 2 diabetics, insulin levels high, right? And you need to bring it down. In type 1, you don't have enough. You got to bring it up to this level. And this level is really tight. Right?
Yeah.
So when I started understanding that, I had to go, wait a minute. Everything I learned in school is wrong. Okay. So another amazing book is Ben Bickman's Why We Get Sick, right? Or Why Are We Sick? Excellent book. And that really goes through the details as to what is the effect of an elevated insulin level, right? In different tissues, different organs. What does having a high insulin level when normally it's very tightly regulated, what does that high insulin level, what kind of effect does it have on various tissues? Because that's a toxicity.
Yeah.
Right? And if you want to look some of this stuff up, I think there's a gingerbread man. I have a metabolic tree. And it basically shows it's here is this tree. And the roots are all of our lifestyle problems, okay? Yeah. And then at the top where the branches are all the diseases that we have associated with the trunk, which is a high insulin level. So what happens when you have a high insulin level? is all this chronic disease. Hypertension, polycystic ovarian syndrome, infertility problems. I'm going to throw mental illness in there.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Right. Such an important connection there. Such an important. I'm going to put cancer up there. Diabetes, hypertension, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, kidney disease. All these things are related to one hormone that gets out of whack. Insulin. Insulin. And you think about insulin like this. Eventually, the fat cell has to ignore the signal of insulin that tells you to keep storing energy and not burning. That is what happens in the little powerhouses of our cells, the mitochondria. This is the energy of life. This is where it comes from. This is the source of all disease. What happens when that mitochondria gets jacked up? What if that mitochondria, you think about a mitochondria in a fat cell, you're trying to get around this giant fat droplet, and you're trying to move around this thing, and you can't, right? How am I creating energy, right? And it's got all this, basically logs, all this energy in this cell, and it goes, oh my gosh, please don't store anymore, or we're going to burst.
Yeah.
Okay? We don't want to burst. But eventually, that fat cell ignores that signal of insulin, which is to store and not burn. When it ignores it, it starts leaking fat into the bloodstream. So what do you see in diabetics? An increase in free fatty acids.
Yeah.
Okay. So now the ADA, though, will tell you that it's saturated fat in the diet. That's why you have saturated fat in the blood. I'm sorry. The human being is so much more beautifully complicated than that. So much better than that. But when that cell has to ignore insulin, the body doesn't know what to do. The only thing it can do would be increase insulin, increase the dose. This is tolerance. This is resistance. Just like you need more than just one cup of coffee, you need more than one glass of alcohol, right?
Yep.
You need more insulin for the same response. And what happens? Glucose levels rising. Oh my gosh, pancreas is going nuts. It's like, hey, we got to make more insulin. Make more insulin. It's trying to meet that demand. And before you know it, insulin levels are starting to rise. And what are the effects of insulin throughout the body? One very important aspect, and this is the obesity code here, is that when you have elevated insulin levels, that stimulation of anabolism, which is to store energy and not burn fat, right?
Yep.
That signal is on, okay? And our diet pushes that. Our diet, which is high in carbohydrates, is going to push insulin levels even higher. You don't want to have an elevated insulin level. Here's the problem. No one's measuring.
Yep.
Oh, man. I mean, that has been my bone of contention for the last 10 years. I don't care if the ADA doesn't agree with some sort of markers. Just measure it.
Yeah.
By the time your glucose finally starts rising, your insulin level has been cooking and going up for so long. And then now you don't have enough insulin to control glucose. Now you're screwed. Now you have diabetes.
Yeah.
But what about everybody else that doesn't get diabetes, but their glucose levels and their insulin levels, most importantly, are elevated?
Yeah.
Now you got all the other disease. You got cardiovascular disease. Hypertension is caused by the indirect effect of insulin on the kidneys to hold on to sodium and water.
Yeah.
That's the cause of excess fluid. This is the cause of hypertension. Okay, so since we're talking, I love this topic because as a pharmacist, this is one of the drugs that we use are called these ACE inhibitors or ARBs, like your losartan, medications. We use medications that work a certain way. The medications work to offset the effect of insulin on your kidneys. And here's a really important thought when it comes to insulin. it makes sense that insulin would cause fluid retention.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you eat carbohydrates, you have to store them with water. Carbs make you bloated. Carbs make you store with water. And about for every gram of carbohydrates, you have almost 4 grams of water. Okay?
Gotcha. Yeah.
We're talking about grams now. Why are we talking about grams? What does that mean? Okay? My objective in life with everybody is to explain everything.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about this crappy carb tank, right? I hate this thing. You don't need it, okay? But your muscles are the biggest reservoir for carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
How much carbs do you think we actually store?
Man, I've heard it kind of depends on the height and weight of
Right.
the person, but it's kind of like up to 600 grams.
Okay.
So, I've heard different things, but that's kind of like, I think what I calculated for myself is somewhere between.
Yeah.
400. Yeah.
Something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
What's a pound?
Pound.
454 grams.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got a pound of carbs?
That's
How
a
many
lot
pounds?
of carbs.
How many pounds of fat do we have?
Probably a lot more.
So we take this tiny tank, probably less than a pound for probably most people, and we refill it 3 times a day.
Whoa, that's perspective.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. It's about perspective, right? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
What does 100 grams? Okay, so 100 grams is going to be in my liver. The
Mhm.
other 300 is going to be in my muscle.
Yeah.
And my muscle, because I'm a fat adapted athlete, I'm going to keep it there.
Yeah.
It's going to stay there. And I've done this measurement. You can measure this just like a DEXA scan. This is the RQ. Anyways, it tells you how much fat versus carbohydrates you're burning at what intensity.
Listen.
So I'm at 85% and I'm finally 50-50 with carbs and fat.
Yeah.
Now I'm starting to burn mostly carbs at that 85% intensity. Someone who is not fat adapted, someone who loves carbs and depends on carbs for energy. This is 93% of our population, by the way.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably up there.
It's way too high. They will burn mostly carbs at a 60 or 65% intensity. So at a very low intensity, they're burning mostly carbohydrates. So you're going to poop out. You're not going to go the distance. You look at like these marathon runners. These guys, a lot of them are fat adapted. They're doing like never recommend this stuff. Western States 100. Yes. So if there's any runners out in the audience, I need to convert your butts because this really makes no sense. I know where there's a lot of athletes here, but we gotta stop the running, guys. We gotta stop. We gotta do this differently. Okay.
Yeah.
Doing long distance is gonna make your legs nice and big and strong. Fantastic. But they're eventually gonna get skinnier. Your upper body, you're gonna lose it. You don't need it. If you don't need it, you're going to lose it. And that's muscle. Okay. Your body just destroys what it doesn't utilize. So in order to keep our muscle mass and strength elevated, we got to do something that stresses it infrequently. We are an adaptive animal that's designed to be outside. It's designed not to live in this 72 degrees, right? We are designed to move. And probably move rapidly for short distances, not long distances. Those that do these marathons and a lot of this endurance, you're going to end up with atrial fibrillation.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that.
Yeah. So what's a better sport? Hello. Paddleboarding.
Yeah.
So you don't you do a lot of zone 2, but it's pleasant. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of zone 2 on the water. But then I will do like people would call it fartlek, so where you're doing super high intensity, bringing it up and then bringing it down. I'm sure you've done this on a treadmill where you're doing high intensity interval training.
Yeah.
And you hate it. We all hate it. It's just like, ugh.
Yep. That and the wind sprints, man.
Yeah, but when you were in school and you were trying out for whatever team, it was double day, the wind sprints after practice that got you in really good shape the fastest. And that's like, how many of us over the age of 40 still sprint?
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one.
To me, I used to be a runner. And so looking at these numbers now, I'm like, all right, for me, it's like a 7-minute mile. And before I'd be like, oh yeah, you're just cruising. Now it's like, wow, I got to crank that up. And then do yourself a favor. If you want to measure, because I believe in measuring.
Yeah.
Grab a hold, jump, sprint like crazy, grab a hold, get that heart rate, figure out what it is, and then see how much you drop in 1 minute. How many beats per minute in 1 minute? That's kind of your VO2 max.
Yeah.
So I've been doing this for so long about measuring. We got to measure. You don't know what your food's doing unless you're measuring. VO2 max, something to measure. Respiratory quotient, something. DEXA scan, something to measure. How much fat mass do you have? Right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to the gym for a purpose. We're trying to reduce fat mass. We're trying to gain lean body mass and try to reduce. How do you know if what you're doing works?
DEXA scan. Yeah.
Yeah. But imagine though, you think about this. You're going to get your labs done. Okay. That between the now and the next time you get your labs, I need you to doing all of these this protocol, right? And we'll see how well it's working in a year. A year? Really? I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to this massive list, eat stuff I don't want to eat things the way I don't even know, right? You're making this up, and then you're going to measure in a year from now to see from your blood work if it made a difference. I'm saying that's ridiculously too long.
Yeah.
I'm saying, let's work on this right now. Let's work on this today. Let's measure something. Let's measure your fitness level. And not just like today. I want to measure, how are you in relation to last week, last month, or just, hey, what did you do this weekend? Well, I partied and had a really good time, and my HRV dropped like a rock. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So these are metric. This is the new language of medicine. Heart rate variability. If it's a bigger number, says you're rested. If it's a low number, you're not thoroughly rested, and you probably should take it easy. Right?
Yeah.
Imagine how useful this would be if we talked about HRV and someone was watching you and going, hey, I noticed that, your HRV was really low, but you still went for a run. All right. And you weren't fully recovered. You can hurt yourself. Be careful. Right? This is not something that you want to do. You're going to burn out. So the objective would be to learn from that, as long as someone's watching you. I feel like you need to have some input. You have to learn what these metrics are. This is the future of medicine. We can't avoid the learning. Okay? Learn what these are, and that's what I do. I love to teach. Yeah. Learn what these are, and then let's monitor. Let's watch them. Let's watch them together. Let's show something really meaningful, but I want you to learn in real time.
Yeah. And dude, 100%. Like, I agree with that, because whatever you start to manage, like when it comes to fat loss and working with my clients, the first thing I gotta basically get them to do, and it might seem like you're pulling teeth initially, is just let's start tracking your shit. And just start logging it. Let's just start looking at it, and then now you can be conscious and you can be aware of it. But a lot of people just aren't even aware. So if somebody is like that right now, what would you recommend they start off doing if they just kind of want to get their health in check? Like, hey, I'm a dude, I'm 46, I've been drinking for forever. What should I start off doing?
Well, you have these metrics. Like I have an Oura ring, and it gives me a lot of data, a lot of sleep data, a lot of stress data. So super helpful. Like if I want to have a really good day out on the water, it's got to start with a really good night of sleep. Yeah. And I'd go back, it starts even before that. Okay. You think about this. It's like when you have days when you've been outside the longest and you've kind of seen the sunrise and the sunset. Okay. You know what time it is. Yeah. And that melatonin will start releasing at the right time. And when you go to lay down at night, you crash like a rock. Mm-hmm. Okay. It has not so much to do with what you were doing as it was to do with the fact that you saw the sun. Mm-hmm. You got to go outside and walk. You got to capture that light. You got to see where it is. Where is it on the horizon? Because that sets up the really good night of sleep, which sets up a really good night a great day the next morning for an awesome workout because your HRV is high. Your respiratory rate looks good and it didn't bounce up, right? We can see disease as well as we can see recovery. We can see positive as well as we can see negative before things happen. But you can't know metabolism without knowing the glucose. I think everyone needs the glucose.
Yeah.
You got to have a CGM. And I feel like, to me, that's been the most enlightening thing. I love my Oura Ring. I love my watch. It gives me tons of data. But knowing like what the diet's doing.
Yeah.
I feel like we're all guessing. And you guys, when I leave the gym, I want to scream. It's the food. It's the food, right?
Yeah.
It's not the gym. This is nice. I think that's great. I think a lot of people burn out and they can't be consistent about it because it hurts.
Yeah.
Right? They end up gaining weight and feeling discouraged because it's not about that scale. It's not about that scale. It's more to do with waist circumference than it is about that stupid scale. It's about fat mass.
Yep.
And that's why you use a DEXA. How are you doing with your program? Well, I've lost, my percent body fat has gone down. That's what I want to hear. That's critical. And how do you know if you're moving in that direction? If you haven't figured out metabolism, especially in relationship to insulin.
Yeah.
You got to have insulin. Everyone's walking around. 93% of the population is walking around with an elevated insulin level.
Which
and
is
we're not measuring.
Nuts. Yeah.
You know what though? Okay, so let's cut some slack on the medical institution or the doctors, because we didn't have insulin. We had cholesterol first.
Yep.
Stupid.
I remember that. Yeah.
Okay. You remember that. Okay. And we had different ways of measuring glucose long time ago. So glucose made sense to us. But insulin, that hormone insulin, man, it wasn't until like the late 70s, and it was a massive machine. It's a very difficult test. Oftentimes, if you want it, it's a send out. They don't do that right there in the hospital.
No.
I used to work at a hospital, like, oh, it's a send out, Kyle. Well, I still want it. Like, oh, well, the cardiac patient, the person that we can't seem to get a hold of their blood pressure, and they're on 5 different blood pressure meds, has an insulin level that's like, say, 4 times normal.
Sure.
Right? So normal is like less than 6, right? It should be like between 2 and 6 is a nice normal fasting insulin level. We're like 10 and above. That's the majority of our population. So that's an elevated insulin level all the time means that you're always in storage mode. Remember, store fat, not burn fat. So you don't access that fat. You just keep taking those excess carbohydrates, and the carb tank's full because it's only a pound anyways. Yeah. It's gonna convert it. Your liver's gonna convert it to fat, and we know that because of triglycerides. So this is another when we were talking about fasting insulin, this is a proxy. It's a really nice proxy. You think about, what does triglycerides in the bloodstream mean? This is fat in your bloodstream, and it's there because you don't burn fat. It's there because you're dependent on the carbohydrates. When you eat carbs and insulin goes up, you are going to burn carbs mostly. Yeah. Okay, right? That changes the fueling of your body, instead of fat, but over to primarily carbohydrates. Insulin controlling the fuel that's being utilized. You can't utilize insulin. You can't utilize and burn that fat that you have tons of if insulin's elevated or insulin's above normal. It has to be low. So people who get their insulin levels low, right? They get their insulin levels low, their glucose levels drop, right? And they start fixing themselves. They start healing, and they start burning fat because insulin's not there stopping that. So think of insulin like the walls of a cell. You think of it like it's a barn. Insulin opens that, throws that food and all that energy in there, fat, carbohydrates, and everything, and then it locks the door. The barn door is locked as long as insulin's there. But if insulin leaves, cell's wide open, but only in those circumstances. So insulin has to be low.
Yeah.
And man has always been with the low insulin level. There wouldn't have been like, okay, so man's say normal glucose is 100. Not for me, but like people that are really healthy are 70 to 90 all day long. And it doesn't fluctuate much. I'm saying old man, even with a bowl of fruit that his wife, pleasantly cooked, prepared for him during that 2-week season when that fruit was available.
Mm-hmm.
Carbs are all seasonal, so that's how it would have happened. I don't think man would have seen a blood sugar above 120.
Jeez,
Okay.
what are we at now then when we have the McDonald's and all that?
Well, okay, so 2/3 of the population is pre-diabetic, and their blood sugar average is about 125.
All day.
Right? All day, that's the average. So they're averaging above 100. They're like 110 to 125. Diabetics over that. People are walking around for decades of sugars at 200 to 300. But like I said before, you would have caught this diabetes, and elevated glucose levels can be toxic over long periods of time. Okay. But we knew that your insulin levels were rising. I mean, this could be a child. This could be a 6-year-old instead of putting them on Ozempic. You could have measured their insulin level. You could have. And that's the tragedy. And why? Why are you hiding the truth? Okay. When I was in pharmacy school, insulin came in a vial, and how many units do you need? And this is how you calculate it. This is how long these things work. Like it's a drug.
Yeah.
Never bothered to tell you that every cell in your body has insulin receptors, every animal cell. This is the anabolic hormone. It's not testosterone.
Yeah.
Insulin is the anabolic hormone king.
Yeah.
Testosterone would be the queen to that. Okay. But insulin is what's driving the obesity epidemic and the fatness. And why is it elevated? Is it mitochondrial toxicity? Right? Is it mitochondria screaming out, hey, no more food? It's like a 5-year-old's room, right? It's full of just junk. And you want to get like the toy rake. You want to get the toy rake and clean it all up, right? And get ready for the next day, right? How futile is that? But imagine just having all this crap in this cell.
Yeah.
When you get the insulin level and get that message and signal from insulin to stop going, save and don't burn, instead, insulin's not there. And you can clean up the cell. You can burn all this. You can get rid of it. Matter of fact, our cells are so amazing that they become inefficient. The mitochondria just start burning it, just getting rid of this fat that's laying around. It gets rid of it in the form of ketones, right? This is what happens in the liver. So it's getting rid of this fat in the form of ketones, and you're wasting like 300 calories a day in your breath and in your urine. And all because you haven't eaten. You've avoided that insulin spike. And you're eating high fat, high protein, right?
Yeah.
When you eat that, you don't get much of a spike in insulin at all. When you add carbs to that little mix, now you've increased this hormone that's going to make you bring in fat, store fat, and not burn it. But when you get the insulin down, the cells can clean up themselves. They can replace the mitochondria. The body becomes very resilient. The cell becomes very resilient. It becomes dependent on fat for energy instead of glucose. Now we can burn. We can finally access what you've been storing for the last 10 years. We can finally start burning it. But what's crazy about this is that you can change the efficiency of the mitochondria, like how you burn. Like it's like a car, like you can dial up or down the efficiency of this motor.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if you got a fat cell, I don't know about you, but I want to make this thing really inefficient and just burn like crazy. Crank that up. So it's only getting like 2 miles to the gallon versus 70, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's just get this thing to start wasting energy and wasting it in the form of heat. So you get warm. You're getting rid of all these calories and all these ketones, which are little bits of fat in your breath and in your urine. You're losing that, and then you're generating heat. Your fat cells are becoming really inefficient. And this is the point of your cold plunging.
Oh.
So I want to make my right. So yes, exactly.
I hate cold plunges, but I know they're effective.
Yes. How do you feel afterwards? Do you feel warmer afterwards?
Yeah, well, you feel like you just shake into like another dimension. You're like, okay, cool. And then you're like, whew.
Yeah.
It's almost like a flush.
The next day, how do you feel?
Refreshed.
Do you feel
I
like
mean,
you
I've
can
played that a
tolerate?
couple times though, but I'm like, bro, I'm off. Yeah, it's kind of like
Uh,
one of those love hate. Because like
yeah,
here in like Vancouver, you'll see people that like they'll go to the ocean, and I'm like, I'm just watching them as I walk around. I'm like, no, you are
yeah.
nuts.
Well, what I do is I have my van real close. So turn the heater on in the van. I go to like a boat ramp. Of course, you got to do it under cover of darkness. So I would go to a boat ramp, jump in, van's on, it's nice and warm. I go in there for my 3 or 4 minutes, jump back in the van. I'm nice and toasty warm. I usually like it. You're so numb, and you're just.
Yeah.
But the point of it is, first of all, I love the benefit of feeling rather warm and cold temperatures while everyone else is suffering. So when I'm outside paddleboarding in the cold temperature, because I paddle all year,
Yeah.
I don't mind that. I can tolerate that cold. The water's cold. I'm not going in. That's not the objective here. The objective is to stay above water. That's why I use a wider board. So
Yeah.
you don't fall in as easily, right?
Yeah, to enjoy yourself out there.
Yeah. But your body's like, oh my gosh, is he going to do that tomorrow? Oh, we got to generate more heat. So your body's response to cold is to increase more mitochondria. So that white fat, which is metabolically really inactive, which we have too much of, starts to beige, and it becomes more like brown fat.
Brown fat.
So it goes from like 2 to 3 calories per gram to like closer to that of like muscle, like five calories per gram. So now you have fat tissue that's behaving closer to like muscle. It's generating a lot of energy and a lot of heat. It's just like, oh my gosh, imagine replacing fat with muscle. Because in a way, you're kind of doing it. You have these fat cells that are really, they're not efficient and miserly with their energy. They're left to just burn it because they got all this mitochondria. The mitochondria just kicking this stuff out and just wasting energy in the form of ketones. And that's why you should measure ketones.
Mm-hmm.
Ketones are critical because that's the living proof. Hey, I'm burning fat. So this is why we measure these things. And that's why we keep these markers so we can make sense of this. So we can tailor your lifestyle to get optimal, to like, how am I going to lose weight? How am I going to lose this fat mass? Well, I got to lower your insulin. How do you know if you're lowering insulin? Well, I need to know glucose. Because every time you spike that glucose, insulin levels goes up. I also want to see stress. We can see the effects of stress through your watch, right? Or through your watch or ring, right? But you can also see the stress with your glucose. Your glucose levels will rise. You think of
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, stress will really spike your glucose. I had a lady that I was monitoring, and I'm like, what are you eating around 5 p.m. every night? Like, how come you're not putting it in your, I'm watching you. You should be putting in your food for me, please. Right? Like, He doesn't put anything. And I'm like, why don't you put anything? And she's like, I'm not eating anything. I'm like, well, what are you doing? It's like, it's my son, that asshole. She's frustrated, right? So emotional stress will make your blood sugar spike. Physical stress as well. You get sick, I'll see it. COVID, blood sugar 100. Over, like within a few hours, your blood sugar's at 200. You're starting to stress. You are in trouble. Yeah, you can catch it early. Or a urinary tract infection, I can catch it early. There's other markers that you would catch early as well. Okay, signs of stress I can see with heart rate variability, respiratory rate, body temperature, like and heart rate. All these things, this is the future of medicine. It's like I can see for myself everything that's going on inside you. Why do you think the military uses this? I can put more sensors on you, and you start thinking about how many more sensors we can add and how useful it would be for all those jocks out there measuring lactate and figuring out your lactate threshold, right? That's the next sensor. Glucose, lactate, maybe we can measure ketones. Fructose would be another cool thing to measure. Uric acid would be a really cool thing to measure.
Yeah.
Uric acid would be okay. So this is a pathway that I think is important, because when we start talking about alcohol, it has all these wicked pathways, and these are horrible. It increases uric acid. We know that alcohol increases gout. But did we know that fructose does the same?
What? I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
So ethanol and fructose, the only difference is the buzz. You still end up with fatty liver. Oh, this is going to blow you away. Okay, so let's go back to the uric acid. This is in a liver cell. Now, you will take this fructose as well as this ethanol into the cell. There's one step. There's one toxic metabolite that we enjoy with ethanol. Okay, that is the buzz. But other than that, once you get to that after effect, that's all going through the liver, and it's creating a fat droplet. It's increasing uric acid, increasing insulin resistance. Okay, so. And it's going to create this lipid abnormality of an increase in triglycerides. It's going to package this up, try to send this throughout the cell. That's why you see triglycerides are very elevated in people that love alcohol, but also in people that love sugar. So sugar is a disaccharide. It's glucose and fructose. That fruit sugar, fructose, it's really not your friend. It's not what you think it is. Fructose, when it overwhelms the liver in a bolus, let's say, Skittles. Skittles is the worst. Okay, you take some Skittles and you take that fructose and you're going to convert it to uric acid. And uric acid inhibits nitric oxide.
Snap. Yeah.
So nitric oxide is a potent vasodilator, right? It allows your blood vessels to relax. So now if you have uric acid diminishing this relaxation through this nitric oxide pathway, you don't get that relaxation of blood vessels, and now blood vessels get tight. We are literally causing an increase in uric acid. We are increasing people's blood pressure. You think twice before you give that kid that Skittles, okay?
Jeez.
Not healthy. It is really unhealthy. This is what I'm saying. Like, this is what I've been pounding. Like, Kyle's the anti-sugar pharmacist. Yes. I've been screaming. It's not natural. It's a poison. Yeah. That thing, its skull and crossbones, should be locked up. You should only be able to get it from the pharmacist when you show your ID. Like it really is that much of a toxin. It's not much different than Roundup.
Yeah, glyphosate. Yeah, or no, is it glyphosate or atrazine? I can't remember.
Yeah, so it's glyphosate.
Yeah, right.
Glyphosate. So what are all these things? All these things are mitochondrial toxins. Fructose is a mitochondrial toxin. You're hurting your mitochondria. The powerhouses of your cell are being destroyed. Stop. Fructose is wicked. It is so bad, okay? But for example, you could give allopurinol, which reduces uric acid. When you give allopurinol with sugar, you reduce that uric acid and there's less hypertension. So you might as well be giving kids a drug that blocks uric acid production like allopurinol. When you hand out those Halloween treats, people, jeez. You wonder why. So why is it really just the red number 5?
No,
that sugar needs to be first and foremost on that list. You think about what I'm saying here and what has to change. It's too much. Like, okay, until the grocery stores become just those two, like those aisles in the periphery, like it's gonna be a long time. All that stuff in the middle, then aisles and aisles of food have to go.
Yeah.
Is that what RFK is going to mandate?
Interesting, because they're getting inaugurated today. I mean, it almost seems like they do have to go that route, though, because however, and I was looking into politics, and they say that one of the biggest issues that comes up when it comes to anybody that's in power is to avoid food shortages and any loss of food at all costs, because that's usually a precursor to revolutions, right? However, we can always vote with our dollar, make the healthiest choices. So that's kind of where it comes down to us, I think, where it's like, and to your point, Kyle, where it's just like, hey, we got to educate people. Like, you got to avoid those middle aisles, because, I was watching a guy try to burn an Oreo. He couldn't burn it.
I saw that.
I'm just like, what the hell is in that? Exactly. I'm like, what is that, dude?
I know, it's funny because my wife and I were just talking about that. We were talking about, like, how many Oreos can you eat before you actually feel the symptoms? Okay, like so 20? Everyone... No, I think after 2.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm a savage.
No. Right? Okay, no, okay, but this is what I'm saying. So this is the education part. So what I'm trying to do is create education in real time. I want you to see the effect of, say, a donut. For example, This is so common. I see this all the time. Blood sugar is 90 when you eat that donut, right? Fine, great, fantastic. Blood sugar goes up to 160, 180. Okay, in 30 minutes. Okay, and then it could be your bowl of cereal. It could name your favorite food that has refined carbohydrates in it, right?
Yeah.
And then 2 or 3 hours later, you are at 50. You're not at 90. You're lowest of the day.
Yeah.
At 50. You release so much insulin that it took a while for that to clear out, and it still pushed your blood sugar even lower.
Jeez,
okay,
man.
So now what happens? You feel like crap. Yeah. Well, you know what? I have an alert that goes off that tells me what you just did. And you get a message, hopefully, on your phone that says, you're experiencing this low blood sugar event. How do you feel? And you put in your oh, I feel like crap. I just noticed it. I feel like crap. Because this is what I want people to know. This is the ultimate learn. That donut gives me this graph, and I feel like this.
Yeah.
If you're not being mindful and you're not paying attention to what's your reaction to your food, you'll never associate the food with the symptom. It's all about this is what it is. I know for myself, because I've been there. When I do this, for example, if I eat peanut butter, right, I will start burping. I'll start feeling it because there's nothing else in me, right? I'm not throwing 10 things down. You have to do your own experimentation. And here's the problem. The accountability and the learning has to happen. I see people with these continuous glucose monitors, like the Freestyle Libre, the Dexcom.
Yeah.
Hey, what are you getting? What's your numbers? How does it look? Oh, that's for my diabetes. I just put it in their pocket, right? There's no accountability. They're not showing it to anybody. No one's asking them about it. No one's going, hey, did you see this? Hey, no, look, I know they'll say this. I'm monitoring. I'm sensing this stuff from my doctor. This is from my doctor's information. Yeah. And when I sit down with him in a few months, we'll spend a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, about what I did for the last 3 months with my blood sugars, right? No, this has to happen in real time. You need to understand so that you can make that change before you decide to have pizza for dinner, right?
Exactly.
And people don't, there's so many aspects of life that you don't realize. If you eat something in the morning, your insulin resistance develops throughout the day. Your blood sugars in the evening time are already elevated. Why would you want dessert? Why would you want to have a pizza, which is such a great combination of refined carbohydrates and fat that it'll raise your blood sugar for 8 to 10 hours. Sorry, Little Caesars. It's the flour. The flour is the refined carbohydrates. It's tiny little pieces of glucose that immediately go into your bloodstream, and your body is not equipped to handle spikes like that. That's why glucose in nature comes with fiber to blunt that response. Yeah. I mean, and also what time of the day? The ultimate question is what's the optimal diet for you based on your metabolic response to food? We have to experiment. We have to learn.
Yeah.
Can't avoid.
I mean, the one question I did have in regards to that, and first and foremost, I'm gonna have to have you on again, Kyle, because we just scraped the surface.
Yeah, I love it.
But I mean, the one question I did have is just in regards to people that I know, we're not saints out here, and I know I have a pizza every now and again and all that kind of stuff. But to your point, I've already experimented enough where I kind of know my body well enough. However, if there's somebody listening to this and he's like, hey man, I still want to have that pizza or I'm still going to have that donut at work. Is there anything that I could take with it that you would recommend that might blunt the effects of the insulin spike that I'm going to receive from it? Is there anything they can do? Is there any protocol that you'd recommend for somebody that's like, hey, I know you're going into this family dinner and I know you're going to eat a little bit more than you should. Just try to mitigate it by doing X, Y, Z. Is there anything that you would recommend in regards to that?
I mean, if you're going to go, right? We don't need to have these poor relationships with food, right? We want to be able to go, you know what? I was ready for tonight. I worked out. Or if you're really smart, you'll eat earlier in the day. And you'll go, you know what? I'm going to go for a walk afterwards. I'm going to bring that down, right? But this is things that you need to see. If you go for a run, a sprint afterwards, it's going to skyrocket, right?
Yeah, it's gonna keep going up. It's like,
It's
oh,
gonna
he's really
go in.
stressed.
I would recommend that you did that HIIT workout before you went for whatever event that you want to feel comfortable at, right? Just understand, like, you know the consequences, and you know how to fix those consequences through your lifestyle. It could be going for a walk after a meal, right? It could be like, all right, I'm going to make sure I'm well hydrated. I'm going to go, if you decide to drink, like I'm going to get really well hydrated. I'm going to make sure I got my salt levels up, because you got to understand it. Ethanol you think about it, you pee in the middle of the night. Well, you're dumping sodium in the middle of the night. You're going to get cramps. You're going to get dehydrated. A lot of the symptoms that we have associated with ethanol is electrolyte abnormalities.
Yeah.
Right. It screws with your sleep. You're not going to have a good HRV the next day. Right. This is not, the next day isn't the day to go plan your historic PR, right? It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Here's the other flip side to that. You think about, like, you think about some of these races and stuff. If you go the day before, you're trying to get used to your environment. You're trying to feel like, where's the hotel room? Where's everything in the hotel room? You don't get a really good night's sleep. It's usually like the second night you get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's usually
generally
the second
happens
night.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to plan ahead for that. But if it's something like, hey, I need a little bit of ethanol possibly to help me get to sleep, right? I'll get to sleep earlier. I may not have the quality of sleep, but these are things that you have to experiment. You have to lay eyes on and go, all right, I see what alcohol does to my sleep. Or when I have dessert before bed, this is what happens. Like, where do I shortchange my sleep, and how is it going to affect me?
Yeah.
Right? Because we dream at different times of night. We get deep sleep at different times of night in comparison to light sleep. Like, where am I on my sleep? Great book by Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. You spend a third of your life doing it. You might as well learn a little bit about it. It's super cool. He does these awesome experiments, unfortunately, on students, on college students. And it's like, okay, sleep deprivation. Like, what does it do? Oh, we measured insulin levels on sleep deprivation. We measured, say, like, he did all kinds of things. What was your glucose level with sleep deprivation? It's like 25% higher. What is your immune function on 5 hours of sleep versus, say, 7 hours of sleep?
Oh.
You realize, like, your CD4, your natural killer cells are like half of what they would normally be at 5 hours versus 7.5 or whatever hours. Yeah. And you wonder why we get sick, right?
That makes a lot of sense. That's insane, man.
Yeah. Yeah. See, these are things that I feel like if you really want to hack and optimize, this is the way to do it, is with data, with sensor data. And you got to know what this data means. And that's my goal. I want people to learn in the moment, though. That's really the goal. It's like, we could just sit here and, like, you're going to learn, say, 10% of what we talked about, right? Mm-hmm. But imagine how meaningful and relatable it would be as if it was happening in real time. Like, that's really going to make it solid in your head. You go, I say donut, and you see your graph. You know, I say donut, visual. And you go, right, indigestion, bloating, reflux. Now I got to take Prilosec before I go to bed. Like, put this stuff together, right? When you can put that together and you go, all right, now I know how to fix myself. I don't need these meds. I can fix my hypertension by myself. Okay.
Yeah.
But I will say this, and this has been something I've been working a lot on, and that is with diabetics. You can't just change your diet and think that it's okay to continue on the medications that you're on, because they become way too strong. The blood pressure meds become way too strong, and the insulin or drugs that increase insulin are too strong, and glucose levels, the blood sugar levels, drop dangerously low. And that's why I would say, as a diabetic, you need to have someone monitor you. Yeah. And I feel like these diabetics, and this is how I started off doing these volunteer diabetes courses and the support group, was because there just wasn't enough education. There's so much here. There's so much to learn, and there's no way. Like, literally, they give you 8 hours of education. And, like, do you realize 8 hours of education wouldn't be enough to really, like, every aspect of your life controls your metabolism and your blood sugar, like, and your disease. Like, come on. And why do you only give it to diabetics? When are we finally, and I'll try not to get too upset about this, but when are we when are we going to define cardiovascular disease as hyperinsulinemia? Cardiovascular disease is a high insulin level. The ADA knows it. The American Heart Association knows it. They know.
Insane.
They know.
Well,
They know that for $3.5 million, that Lilly can keep the ADA very quiet and happy.
yeah. And that's kind of where the lobbying comes in and all that. And the thing is, too, it's like, to your point, I just recently started reading a couple papers where they're talking about dementia and how Alzheimer's, they just want to call it, what's it again? Type 4 diabetes. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, hold on.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I'm like, wait a minute. Or type 3, my bad. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just like,
right.
Hold on, wait a minute. We got the data?
We do. And that's what's frustrating. Okay, but this is going to make sense to you. Do you want me to explain it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Type 3 diabetes is a problem of glucose metabolism in the brain. Okay. And eventually the glucose can't get to the brain because of this insulin resistance at this blood-brain barrier. Okay. So whatever affects your metabolism affects your brain because you feed it, correct?
Yeah.
So the brain would love to burn glucose. Okay. If the brain would love to burn glucose, it wants to keep that glucose supply nice and high. It's going to drive those cravings to glucose. It's going to drive that. You're going to want ice cream. You're going to want donuts. As if you look at people that are demented, Alzheimer's dementia patients, they want ice cream. They want what's sweet. Hello, Joe Biden. No, I'm dead serious. Okay. So this is going to make a lot of sense to you. Your body, to keep that glucose supply constant, will liquidate that muscle you got.
What?
Yeah, it's going to gluconeogenesis, make glucose out of something other than sugar with that muscle. So who are the most vulnerable people for dementia? People with low muscle mass.
Oh, wait.
Women.
Wow.
Women are much more likely to develop Alzheimer's than men. They are decomposing their protein for the sake of their brain. The brain's the last organ to go down here. And if it is in control, and if it wants glucose, it's going to get glucose. Here's the thing. So on autopsies, we find that these Alzheimer's patients, they have a glucose problem. There's low glucose inside the brain, and they've developed insulin resistance. But they never develop resistance to ketones, fat. The brain can burn ketones and fat as well as it can burn glucose. If glucose is always abundant, it'll prefer that. But if glucose isn't abundant, when you restrict and you take back control of this brain, think about this, take back control. You give the brain the food that it really needs, not what it wants. You give the food that it needs, right? Needs and wants are so different. The brain runs better on fat and ketones.
That's super interesting.
You think better. You have clearer mind. You will never, ever develop a resistance to burning fat and ketones in your brain. You will forever be a ketone fat burning machine in your brain. So here's what's crazy. I'll tell you how this started, and it's annoying, but it happened. Okay. So they would feed these people carbohydrates, and they go, okay, what is the brain utilizing? The brain's utilizing a lot of carbohydrates because you're feeding it carbohydrates. Okay. In a fed state, the brain wants 130 grams of carbs per day.
Yeah.
Okay. That is absolutely false. That was because you were feeding them carbs. But what if you fasted these people? How much glucose do they burn then? Instead of burning almost all carbs, like 75 to 80% of most people walking around are burning, their brain is burning 80% of its energy as carbohydrates, as glucose. And only 20 to 25% is fat. Flip those around. My brain's running 75, 80% on fat and ketones and only 25% on glucose because that's not my preferred fuel source because my blood sugar is always low anyways. Go ahead. That glucose is going to be there tomorrow because I don't use it. Right? That's not what my preferred energy is. My preferred energy is fat. That's what I burn. So I'm not decomposing muscle for the sake of my brain. So what causes longevity? What helps us live longest and not get dementia? Muscle mass, oddly enough. Huh. And
Nice.
running. VO2 max, a high VO2 max. How good a shape are you in? And if you're going to be in good shape, you're probably someone that goes outside a lot.
Yeah.
Right? So you got plenty of vitamin D. You're exposed to different temperatures. Just think about how man used to be and go,
Yeah.
hey, exposed to the elements, constantly moving, right? Fasted. Fasting was something that, whether we liked it or not, we had to have done, right? There's no way that we needed to go 3 square meals with 70% of our energy coming from carbohydrates.
Yeah.
That's the oddball here. Okay. So now let's think about these, the 3 macronutrients, right? You got fat, carbohydrates, and protein. If you look at a cell, this is what we're made of. We're going to be honest. We're made up. And if you look at that cell, it's got fat and protein in it. There are no carbs. There's no structure. There is no structure inside that cell that says glucose is what, I need glucose to be able to form. Like, no, I'll make it. I'll make the glucose. I'll make it from a backbone of a triglyceride. I'll make it from lactate. I will make glucose from other sources, but there is no part of the cell that is glucose for structure. So glucose, therefore, is only energy. It's only for burning. It is no other purpose but to burn energy. Okay? But what's fat and protein? Fat can be used for energy, and I will say way more efficient for the use of energy. Fat's a better energy source. Not to mention it packs well. Okay? You don't need a bunch of water with fat.
Yeah.
Okay. Fat mass doesn't come with water. Water and oil don't mix anyways. Right. So you know what? It actually looks pretty good on us. We can distribute it out nice and evenly. Okay. That's this great energy source, but it's also part of our structure of our cells. A very important structure is that cellular membrane around our cells, as well as the membrane around our mitochondria. It has to work perfectly. It's a phospholipid membrane, and it has to work beautifully. And it won't work beautifully if you don't eat a lot of saturated fat. Because what happens when you don't have a lot of saturated fat and you have these seed oils, well, that's going to be, it's going to be incorporated. You know, you're going to this. Huh? You know that membrane, when it has seed oils in it, they're oxidized. The membrane can operate like a phospholipid membrane, a non-polar phospholipid membrane. Your cell lining, your membranes of your cells aren't going to operate like they should if you keep putting seed oils in there, because your body has to replace that cell before it takes that seed oil out and puts another saturated fat in it. Saturated fat is superior to your omega-3s, your omega-6s, right? Well, not your omega-3s, to your omega-6s, because it's hard to oxidize.
Yeah.
It is very difficult to make saturated fat go rancid. The oxidation is the rancidity. Corn oil goes rancid. Now, if you think about that, corn oil that's now oxidized is now going to go somewhere in your body where you have a cellular membrane, whether it is the cell membrane or the mitochondria. It's going to store it. Well, that membrane can't operate properly. And the only way we're going to be able to replace it is if we either try to burn it and recycle it, or we kill the cell and we start over again with another cell. But you keep putting, so we have this problem with our lifestyle increasing oxidation.
Yeah.
Okay. Oxidative stress. We call this ROS. Okay. So here's the analogy. You think of a furnace burning. Okay. The mitochondria is this furnace and it's generating energy. It's kind of glowing. It's just glowing like this with good energy. Have you ever a potbelly stove in your house?
No. I just got, I got the old school one.
Yeah. Well, there's potbelly stoves, right? These potbelly stoves, they kind of, man, you put too much of the wrong kind of wood in it, they will glow, right? That's when you have to worry about it melting and changing shape, right? These things get so hot.
Yeah.
So think of your mitochondria as this cell. This. Think of your mitochondria as this furnace, and it's glowing, it's generating heat. Imagine now if you open up the door, right? That is just like your mitochondria giving off ROS, reactive oxygen species, and these things rip through and burn holes and stuff, right?
Jeez.
Just exploding. Normally, you have antioxidants, glutathione, vitamin C, following that.
Yeah.
So that they scavenge these hot embers basically from exploding out of your furnace. So they're trying to like keep the damage under control, right? But these ROS things, these things go everywhere. They rip through stuff. They all rip through your DNA.
Yeah.
What do you think you have now? Now you have mutations.
Uh-oh.
Right? Okay. The mutation part. This is important. So now you have this insult to your DNA. Your genetic code is now getting ripped through, and your body has this opportunity to misread it if it doesn't repair it. So we want to keep our DNA methylated and protected.
Yeah.
Okay? So keep our DNA protected, but that takes energy to get rid of the mutations. To protect the DNA requires energy. All energy comes from the mitochondria of the cell. So if you have a damaged mitochondria or a misshaped mitochondria, you have cancer.
Oh.
You have the origin of cancer. So now think about it, like you've got your DNA. This is where epigenetics plays in. You got this exposed bad DNA, this exposed bad genetic material. Okay. And you're insulting it, right? This ROS is just ripping through it, and you're trying to repair it, but you need the energy to repair those mutations. And you have mutations all the time, thousands of mutations all the time that are occurring day to day, minute to minute, right? You have to protect this DNA constantly. It's not just like it happened once in a while. Like, no, it's constant. It's a constant trying to protect our DNA from being misread. That energy comes from the mitochondria that allow it to do that. So when the mitochondria can't supply that energy to protect your DNA, you've got this problem. Now you've got mutations, right?
That's brutal.
Okay, so the work of Thomas Siegfried is who I would direct you to. And he's all about cancer as being a metabolic problem. Because in cancer cells, you have dysfunctional mitochondria.
Mm-hmm.
Forget about the genetic part. The genetic part has gotten us where?
Nowhere. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm like, we're still walking.
Yeah. Think pink, and you think of what?
Breast cancer.
Breast cancer. I think pink, and I think of Keytruda and all these drugs that they're going to push on you, and you're only 10% effective. Yeah. Really? 10%. And how many of these people die because of the chemotherapy? That's another discussion. But anyway,
I was going to say that's
that I love this discussion about cancer, because to me, this is the kind of stuff that's like, this needs to come out. It needs to come out quickly. We're losing life. Okay. Too many people are dying because you're not sharing the right information. And the right information is every single of one of these cancer cells has a misshaped mitochondria. It's not the normal perfect shape. Okay. Doesn't completely, because it's the mitochondria is membranes that are folded onto each other to try to increase surface area.
Yeah.
Right. If you're something small and you want to do a lot, you got to have a lot of surface area when you kind of unfold yourself. Right. So these are all just folded membranes, the mitochondria, and that mitochondria is what's misshaped in cancer cells. They don't work right. So what does the cell do to create energy if you have a jacked up mitochondria? It has to ferment. It takes glucose and generates lactate without the mitochondria. It doesn't need a mitochondria. And it can take glucose and generate lactate and get rid of the lactate and recycle it. But that generates only 2 ATPs. Not a lot of energy, but it can do it very rapidly, super quick, right? So when you keep feeding your tumor cells plenty of glucose,
okay.
So this is why they say, oh, sugar feeds cancer. Well, glucose specifically feeds cancer cells because the mitochondria, where the cell would normally get a lot more energy and it would be slower. It would get 36 more ATPs. Okay, a lot more energy if it used the mitochondria. And we know it's not using the mitochondria because it's generating all this lactate. Okay, so lactate levels would go up. Okay, so here's the work of Thomas Siegfried. I don't want to lay claim to this. The guy freaking he deserves the Nobel Prize for this. And this is a really cool. It's it is a, what did he call it? It's the nuclear exchange. So it's a nuclear I forgot the exact name of it. It's what he does is he takes a cancer cell with jacked up misshaped mitochondria, okay, and it has the DNA of a cancer cell. They remove that out and they put in perfectly good DNA. So what do you got? You got good DNA in a cancer cell environment, essentially the cytoplasm or the cell of a cancer, right? With the misshapen mitochondria. So here is perfectly good DNA in a cell with jacked up mitochondria. Offspring, 100% cancer. So you had healthy DNA. If this is a genetic problem, please explain to me how you take normal DNA and in a jacked up environment where mitochondria don't work, that you have a cancer offspring. Here's the flip side. I can take all the tumor, all the horrible cancerous DNA, put it into a normal cell with good, healthy mitochondria. The offspring is not cancerous. Okay? This is some pretty, like, this really pertains to breast cancer, ovarian cancer, testicular cancer, prostate cancer. Like, all these cancers are mitochondrial disease.
I mean, it kind of gets into, I don't know if you ever heard of terrain theory, where I started hearing that around COVID time, where people would bring up terrain theory again. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I 100% believe in it. I will entertain it, right? However, it is something to kind of consider in the conversation. It's like, I think the terrain does kind of play into it. You know, it's like, you got good healthy cells, you got good mitochondria firing up the way that they should. I think it probably will have some positive benefits. And Thomas Siegfried looks like I'm going to have to do some research on that tonight, because I'm like, I've never heard of that.
You know, so fascinating work. So incredible. But what makes you, I don't want to get too much into cancer. I would love talking about cancer, but this lactate generates this acidic environment. Like, this lactic acid creates an acidic environment around the tumor. And that way it can evade radiation. Yeah. So we know, and there's some really cool studies being done on this, and it's using, so carbohydrate restriction, as you can imagine, glucose restricting patients that are going into chemotherapy, cancer patients. So you're lowering the food for the tumor. You're getting rid of that glucose.
You're killing it.
Okay. You're killing it.
Yeah.
You stress it. Okay. You stress it. So a couple of days before you're going to have your chemotherapy, you're fasting, and these people are fasted. This is this is a hard sell to a doctor. Hey, your patient that has a tumor is now going to fast and not eat. You're like, what? They're going to get, right? That's a problem. To them, that's a problem. But they will lose, as you always do when you fast, you will lose mostly fat mass. People aren't dying because of not enough fat here. Okay, they're dying because they don't have enough muscle mass. Yeah. That's what we got to create, right? So they're fasted prior to this protocol, and then they'll even give them. Now this is pretty cool. But you give them a little bit of insulin, even stress, and push the glucose levels lower. Okay, so wait a minute. You think about, okay, this is crazy, Kyle. You're talking about fasting someone and giving them some insulin and lowering their glucose levels even more. How could you do that? You're going to kill them, right? That's what you think. Okay, my blood sugar goes into the 40s at night, 40s and 50s. you don't know until you measure. You can't
Mhm.
manage what you don't measure. You got to measure, right? I've seen it, right?
Yep.
It's right in front of my eyes. Okay. So this really cool starvation study, small tangent, I promise. So they fasted them for a month and gave them a shot of insulin. Their blood sugar went down between 20 and 40, super low blood sugars, and they didn't die.
What?
It's a success because the brain doesn't need the glucose. The brain's mostly a fat burner because it's the brain that would kill you. The brain's gonna shut off. If you don't have enough glucose, the brain's not going to shut off. All right.
Jeez.
This is critical. The brain will shut off if there isn't enough glucose. Now, pay attention, athletes. When you hit the wall, that's why. The glucose level in your bloodstream isn't high enough for the brain liking. Okay? If you can tolerate a lower glucose because you're more fat adapted in the brain, you can tolerate lower glucose levels. You can tolerate a 40. If you're a diabetic and you're used to having blood sugar 300 and somebody drops you to 40, you're awake. Trust me, you're going to have a heart attack. It's scary. It's very scary and very stressful. Sure. But what we're not talking about is the fact that man is very much a fat adapted animal, and he can burn either or. He can burn fat, he can burn carbohydrates. And I'm here to say that the carbohydrate tank, that's got to go. Literally, that's the food pyramid.
Yeah.
You've killed us. Literally have killed us. But I would probably say seed oils and sugar has probably sent us in that direction. But once again, you're doing damage to the mitochondria. Okay, fructose is wicked, sugar is wicked, and it's about so Gary Taub's book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, talks about this, and right around 70 pounds of sugar per person per day. Now, this is based on disappearing food data. He's such a good guy. I love Gary. I would love to meet him someday. But Gary wrote this great book, Good Calories, Bad Calories. He wrote several other books, but he's an investigative journalist, and he's looking at this going, what are people really eating? This doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
When people eat about 70 pounds of sugar per person per year, chronic disease shows up. You can take Africans and put them in New York, is what they were noticing, and within just a short period of time, they were obese and they had hypertension. Okay, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't add up. Okay, so this will blow you away too. How in the world can women that are pregnant and delivering children in Tobago, which is a very poor country, and their average caloric intake is 1,200 calories per day, yet their child is small and malnourished? If it's just a calorie thing, this person has plenty of energy, plenty of calories, should be very well nourished, right? If it's a calorie thing and you really want to just reduce our calories, those people, what would you do for them if they try to reduce their calories?
Exactly,
right?
Yeah.
It's your hormonal response to your food that we're not looking at, we're not measuring. And that narrative has been there by the ADA. They are the responsible party. They are the ones that have said, you need to use insulin in a condition of high insulin. And what happens? They always gain weight.
Mm-hmm.
The dose always goes up. That's your resistance. The dose always goes up.
Sure.
And it's absolutely not necessary. Sarah Hallberg in 2015 was a very important person to me. God bless her. She had the guts to say on a TED Talk, she said, ignore the guidelines. Ignore the American Diabetes Association guidelines. Now, as a physician, you can face some serious consequences. Not to mention, you're not going to get any grant money.
Grants.
Not going to get any government grant.
Yeah, it's kind of
your research prospects are over,
mm-hmm.
right? But she was right. Okay, and I looked into it, and I started doing my homework. I started looking. Okay, so why is she saying that? What's the problem here?
Mm-hmm.
The medical literature is conflicted. And how do you know that? As you, the consumer, you're the person that wants to know. If you're the pharmacist that goes, what the heck is she talking about? What resources do you have? You're not going to probably find this on Google, but it's open payments, CMS, I think cmsdata.gov, where you can actually look up your doctor. So what I did I looked up all these people that sit on this panel, like who U.S. dietary guidelines, as well as the American Diabetes Association, who's making these recommendations to use these drugs, right, and follow these procedures. Who are these doctors? You go there and you will find, like I did, that this panel had something like $750,000 donated to them from Big Pharma. And I'm screaming. And I'm a conspiracy theorist, apparently, right? And it's been driving me nuts. But I'm telling you, I am so grateful for days like today because it makes me feel like, okay, Kyle, you're not so radical anymore. It's nice not feeling so left out and isolated, going like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, wait a minute. I'm sure a lot of people are in their head are like, remember that pharmacist that like cornered me in the hallway and started talking about insulin and carbohydrates with me? And he was the anti-sugar pharmacist, right? Because I used to do like this. It's just education. I would do just the education in this diabetes clinic. 3 months later, they're not diabetic. They've lost 20 pounds, and I've just been monitoring them. And they're crushing it. It feels so good to know that, like, we needed a gong. Like,
yeah, we did.
Like you reverse that. You know how good it feels to, but this isn't new. Like, so I've been following this company, Virta Health, since the beginning, and they reverse diabetes in over half of their patients. Why isn't that frontline news?
Because there's no money in that. That's why. We know that.
Yeah.
But
they had patients in Indiana being coached by coaches in San Francisco. 54% reverse their diabetes. Off insulin. No. Blood pressure improved. Everything improves. And they were able to stay on the diet after 2 years. If you follow that, eat less, move more paradigm, you're going to just get frustrated. And nobody follows that. Nobody can follow it because that is a setup for disaster. That is a setup for a weight gain. That's why when I'm thinking, when you're on that treadmill and it's counting your calories, it's your food. It's your food. Yeah. You can undo all of that so fast. Not to mention, if you want to burn a pound of fat, you got to run for 4 hours. Good luck. That's a stupid idea. Not to mention that in 6 months from now, doing that exact same run, you're going to burn half the amount of calories. That's so stupid.
Adaptation. Yeah. No, it's 100% true.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. There's
a lot of things that just need to be reworked and relooked at. But that's why I appreciate your work, Kyle. Before you go today, though, man, let me know, or let the audience know, where can we find you, contact information, all that good stuff. And I will have all the links in the description, of course, but if you could let us know here as well.
Yeah. Go to my website, Unscripted Pharmacist. I'd love to have you either as a client or if you know a diabetic that needs some help, okay? This is putting them in the right direction by getting them managed, and really don't be afraid of doing some measuring. Okay, don't be afraid of this new language. All right, don't be afraid to learn. Let me help you learn. I'll help guide you back to better health. If you go to my website, I have different packages that are available, or just schedule me for a 30-minute consult. I really enjoy discussions like this. I don't know how I could ever go 30 minutes, but I'll try. But I love to share, and I'm really passionate about this because I know that it works. And not in somebody, not just a few, with like a small percentage. It happens in every Homo sapien.
Yeah.
When they learn and understand what their lifestyle and everything is doing to them, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
The goal is for people to say, you know what, Kyle, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. When I hear that, I know, okay, that's my return on investment. And they come back and they go, I lost 30 pounds. Yeah. I feel great. Like, yes, that's what it's all about, right?
100%. 100%. It's all about getting guys back into their optimal health. So anybody listening, be sure to click the links. Kyle, thank you again. This was absolutely fantastic. And I'm probably going to have you on again. So
awesome. Thank you. Thank you, CJ. Love it. You take care, man.
And we'll see you guys in the next episode.